The scorching Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on Theodora Kincaid's bonnet as she reined in her horse atop the dusty ridge. Her throat parched, and her spirit nearly broken after 3 weeks of searching for suitable land. What she found instead was a lone figure in the distance, stubbornly digging holes in what appeared to be the most inhospitable patch of earth she'd ever laid eyes on, and something about his determined movements against such hopeless odds made her heart flutter unexpectedly. It was 1876, 2 years since Theodora had buried her father, 3 years since her mother had succumbed to consumption, and exactly 6 months since her brother James had written from Arizona territory urging her to join him in building a new life. The letter had arrived in Boston just as the family business was being seized by creditors, leaving Theodora with nothing but a small trunk of personal belongings and a desperate need for a fresh start. But James wasn't at the homestead he'd described in his letters. Instead, she'd found an abandoned shack with signs of hasty departure, and a note explaining he'd joined a cattle drive north and would return in 3 months' time. With limited funds and nowhere else to go, Theodora had made the difficult decision to wait for her brother and find a way to survive in this harsh, unforgiving landscape. She watched the stranger for several minutes, perplexed by his actions. The ground was clearly parched, cracked from months without rain, yet he continued to dig small holes in neat rows, dropping something into each before covering them and moving to the next spot. Her curiosity finally overcoming her caution, Theodora guided her horse down the slope toward the man. As she approached, she could make out more details: broad shoulders beneath a faded blue shirt, dark hair curling from beneath a worn hat, and the confident movements of someone who knew exactly what he was doing, however futile it might seem. "Excuse me," she called when she was about 50 yards away, not wanting to startle him. The man straightened immediately, one hand moving instinctively to the pistol at his hip before he registered that the approaching rider was a woman. He relaxed slightly but remained guarded as she drew closer. "Madam," he said with a respectful nod, removing his hat to reveal a handsome face weathered by sun and wind with eyes as blue as the summer sky back east. "Vincent Xavier at your service." Theodora slid from her saddle, grateful for the chance to stretch her legs. "Theodora Kincaid." "I apologize for interrupting your—" She glanced at the rows of freshly disturbed soil. "You're planting." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Most folks think I've lost my mind when they see me out here, it does seem." She hesitated, not wanting to offend. "Foolish." He supplied, the smile growing. "Crazy, a complete waste of time." "I was going to say optimistic," she replied, surprised at how easily the word came. Vincent's smile widened, revealing a dimple in his left cheek. "That's a kind way of putting it. What are you planting?" Theodora asked, genuinely curious now. "Corn, beans, and squash." He gestured to the land around them. "The soil here is better than it looks, it just needs water." His eyes lifted to the cloudless sky. "And water will come." There was such certainty in his voice that Theodora found herself wanting to believe him, despite all evidence to the contrary. "You sound very sure of that," she said. Vincent nodded. "I am." He studied her for a moment. "You're not from around here." "No, I'm from Boston. I came to join my brother, but—" She trailed off, suddenly aware that she was sharing personal details with a complete stranger in the middle of nowhere. "But he's not here," Vincent finished for her, his expression softening with understanding. "James Kincaid." Theodora's eyes widened. "You know my brother. This territory isn't as big as it seems once you've lived here a while," Vincent explained. "He joined the Holloway Drive heading to Wyoming. Good outfit, fair pay. He should do well." Relief washed over Theodora. At least she knew her brother was safe. "He left a note saying he'd be back in 3 months." Vincent nodded. "That sounds about right. Cattle drives take time." He glanced at her horse, noting the travel gear. "Where are you staying until then?" Theodora hesitated. "At his homestead. It's not much, but the Kincaid place." Vincent frowned. "Madam, that's no place for a lady on her own. The roof leaks and it's too remote." I don't have many options, Mr. Xavier, she replied stiffly, her pride wounded. Vincent studied her for a long moment, then glanced at the sun's position. It'll be dark soon. My ranch is just over that ridge, proper house, solid roof. My housekeeper, Mrs. Ramirez, would be glad for female company. You could stay there until your brother returns. Theodora straightened her spine. I couldn't possibly impose, it's not an imposition, he said firmly. It's what neighbors do out here, we look out for each other. We've only just met, Theodora pointed out. For all you know, I could be dangerous, Vincent laughed, a warm sound that seemed to brighten the air around them. Madam, with all due respect, if you're dangerous, then I'm the King of England. He grew serious again. The offer stands, think about it at least. Theodora considered his words. The prospect of returning to the dilapidated shack she'd spent the last week trying to make habitable was hardly appealing, and there was something trustworthy about Vincent Xavier, despite his seemingly irrational farming practices. Very well, she said finally. I accept your hospitality, but only until I can make other arrangements. Vincent nodded, clearly pleased with her decision. Fair enough. He gathered his tools and the small sack of seeds he'd been planting. I'll finish for the day and show you to the ranch. As he resumed his planting, Theodora watched with fascination. May I ask why you're so certain rain will come? From what I've heard, this area has been in drought for nearly 2 years. Vincent paused, looking up at her with those remarkable blue eyes. Faith, Miss Kincaid. Some things you just have to believe in, even when all evidence points to the contrary. Like planting seeds in dry ground, she murmured, exactly like that. He finished the row he was working on and straightened. Everything worthwhile in life requires faith, whether it's planting crops, building a home, or… He trailed off, a faint color touching his cheeks. Or what, Mr. Xavier? Or finding love, he finished quietly. Sometimes you have to believe in possibilities before there's any proof they might come true. Something in his words resonated deep within Theodora, striking a chord she hadn't known existed. She'd come west seeking security and family, not romance or adventure. Yet standing there in the fading light, watching a man plant seeds in defiance of drought, she felt a sense of possibility she hadn't experienced in years. I believe we should head to your ranch before darkness falls completely, she said, suddenly self-conscious. Vincent nodded, gathering his things and whistling for his horse, which appeared from behind a nearby outcropping of rocks. He mounted smoothly, then waited for Theodora to do the same. It's about 20 minutes' ride, he explained as they set off. Not far, but the terrain can be tricky in the dark. They rode in companionable silence for a while, Theodora taking in the stark beauty of the landscape as twilight painted the rocks and cacti in shades of purple and gold. Despite the harshness of the environment, there was an undeniable majesty to it that stirred something in her soul. How long have you been in Arizona territory? She asked eventually. 7 years, Vincent replied. Came out after the war with nothing but my horse and what I could carry. You fought in the war between the states, he nodded, his expression growing distant. Union Army, 2nd Massachusetts Cavalry. Joined up when I was 18, came home at 22 feeling like I'd aged 20 years. Theodora studied his profile, trying to reconcile the hardened veteran with the man of faith she'd encountered planting seeds. What made you choose this place? A smile returned to his face. I didn't. It chose me. He gestured toward the horizon where a cluster of buildings had appeared. I was passing through, planning to go to California, when my horse went lame right there where the house now stands. While I was waiting for him to heal, I started noticing things about the land, the soil, the way the water ran during the rare rains. I just knew this was where I was meant to be. Theodora was struck by his conviction. And have you ever regretted staying? Not once, he said without hesitation. Even in the hardest times, even during the drought, I've never doubted this is where I belong. As they crested the final rise, Theodora caught her breath. Below them, nestled in a small valley, stood a proper ranch house with several outbuildings. A corral held a dozen horses, and even in the fading light she could see that the surrounding land had been carefully tended. Most surprising of all, she saw patches of green, a vegetable garden near the house, protected by a stone wall and what appeared to be fruit trees behind it. "Welcome to Esperanza Ranch," Vincent said, pride evident in his voice. "It means hope in Spanish." "It's beautiful," Theodora said honestly. "How do you manage to grow anything in this drought? Hard work, careful water management, and—" He grinned. "Faith, Miss Kincaid, always faith." As they rode into the yard, a stout woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. Her dark hair was streaked with silver, and her weathered face broke into a warm smile when she saw Vincent. "Señor Vincent, you bring company," she called, her accent revealing her Mexican heritage. "Mrs. Ramirez, this is Miss Theodora Kincaid," Vincent introduced as they dismounted. "She's James Kincaid's sister, newly arrived from Boston. She'll be staying with us until her brother returns from the cattle drive." Mrs. Ramirez hurried forward, her smile widening. "Welcome, welcome. Come inside, you must be exhausted. Dinner is almost ready." Theodora found herself enveloped in a quick, warm embrace before being ushered toward the house. She glanced back at Vincent, who was handing the horses over to a young, stable hand. "Go on," he encouraged. "Get settled. I'll join you shortly." The interior of the ranch house was a revelation. While the furnishings were simple, everything was clean and well-maintained. The main room had comfortable-looking chairs arranged near a stone fireplace, bookshelves lined one wall, and colorful woven rugs covered portions of the wooden floor. It felt like a true home, not just a shelter. "Let me show you to your room," Mrs. Ramirez said, leading Theodora down a short hallway. "Señor Vincent has the best house for many miles. He built it himself, you know." "It's lovely," Theodora replied, genuinely impressed. "I wasn't expecting something so civilized out here, Mrs." Ramirez laughed. "Ah, you thought we all live like savages in the territory? No, no, Señor Vincent believes in creating beauty where you can find it." She opened a door, revealing a small but charming bedroom with a real bed, a washstand, and even a small vase of wildflowers on the dresser. "This is our guest room. The water in the pitcher is fresh. Dinner in half an hour, yes," Theodora nodded, overwhelmed by the sudden hospitality after weeks of hardship. "Thank you, Mrs. Ramirez. This is more than I expected." The older woman patted her hand. "That is what Esperanza Ranch does exceeds expectations." With a smile, she left Theodora to freshen up. Alone, Theodora sank onto the edge of the bed, emotion welling in her throat. She hadn't realized how much the strain of recent months had affected her until this moment of unexpected kindness. Pulling herself together, she washed her face and hands in the cool water, smoothed her travel-wrinkled dress as best she could, and repinned her hair. When she emerged, she found Vincent and Mrs. Ramirez in the dining room where the table was set for three. The aroma of freshly baked bread and some sort of savory stew made Theodora's stomach growl embarrassingly loudly. Vincent looked up at her entrance, his smile warm. "Just in time. Mrs. Ramirez makes the best venison stew in the territory." Theodora took the seat he pulled out for her, acutely aware of how long it had been since she'd enjoyed a proper meal in civilized company. "It smells wonderful." As they ate, Vincent asked thoughtful questions about her journey west, never prying but showing genuine interest in her experiences. In turn, Theodora found herself curious about how he had established such a successful ranch in such challenging conditions. "The secret is water," he explained when she asked. "Most newcomers don't understand how precious it is here. I spent my first year just observing where the rain went when it did fall, how the ground absorbed it, where the natural contours could be enhanced to capture more." He built catchments and cisterns, Mrs. Ramirez added proudly. "Every drop of rain that falls on this ranch is saved." "And that's enough?" Theodora asked, gesturing toward the garden she'd seen outside. Vincent shook his head. "Not by itself. We also have a year-round spring on the property. It's small but reliable. Most folks didn't value it. Too little flow for cattle ranching, but it's perfect for what I needed. Which is a different kind of ranch, he said. I raise horses primarily. They need less water than cattle. I grow enough food for us and some to trade, and I experiment with crops that can thrive with minimal water. Like the seeds you were planting today, Theodora asked. A shadow crossed Vincent's face. That's different. That land isn't part of the ranch. It belongs to the Wilcox family, or it did. Mrs. Ramirez made a sympathetic noise. Such a tragedy. Sensing a story, Theodora waited, and after a moment, Vincent continued. Thomas Wilcox and his wife Sarah had a small farm east of here. Good people. They worked that land for 5 years, had some success with drought-resistant wheat varieties. Then last winter, influenza took them both within a week of each other. Their children, 2 boys, 12 and 10, went to live with an aunt in Tucson. And the land, Theodora asked softly, sits abandoned. The bank will claim it eventually, but… Vincent shrugged. Until then, I plant it. Thomas always believed that land had potential. Said the soil had a richness most people couldn't see. Is that why you're so sure rain will come? Theodora asked. Because of the soil quality. Vincent's eyes met hers across the table, and the intensity in them made her breath catch. I'm sure because I have to be. Because giving up isn't in my nature, and because I made a promise to a dying friend that his dream wouldn't die with him. The conviction in his voice silenced Theodora. This wasn't just optimism or even faith in the abstract. This was a deeply personal commitment to honoring someone's memory. After dinner, Mrs. Ramirez shooed them both onto the porch while she cleared away the dishes. The night had fallen completely now, and the sky above was a vast canopy of stars, more than Theodora had ever seen in Boston. It's breathtaking, she murmured, leaning against the porch railing. One of the compensations for living so far from civilization, Vincent agreed, standing beside her. No city lights to dim the view. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the chorus of night creatures and the occasional distant howl of a coyote. Thank you for your hospitality, Mr. Xavier, Theodora said finally. I don't know what I would have done otherwise. Vincent, please, he replied, and you're welcome to stay as long as you need. Theodora nodded, though she was already thinking she shouldn't impose for long. I'm still trying to decide what to do. I came west expecting to help my brother establish his homestead, but now you're wondering if there's a place for you here at all, Vincent finished for her. Yes, she admitted. I have some skills. I can read and write well. I'm good with numbers, and I was helping with my father's business before. She trailed off, not wanting to rehash the financial disaster that had ultimately prompted her journey west. Before circumstances changed, Vincent supplied diplomatically. Those are valuable skills in a growing territory. The town of Copper Springs is only 5 miles from here, small but growing. They might have need of someone who can teach or help with record keeping at one of the businesses. Hope flickered in Theodora's chest. You think so? I know so, he said with certainty. I go into town every Saturday for supplies. You're welcome to join me this week and make some inquiries. I would appreciate that very much, Theodora said, relief evident in her voice. Having a plan, even a tentative one, made her feel more in control of her situation. Vincent smiled, and in the soft glow of the lantern hanging by the door, his face was kind and open. This territory rewards those willing to work hard and adapt, Miss Kincaid. I have a feeling you'll do just fine here. As Theodora retired to her room that night, she found herself thinking about Vincent Xavier and his unwavering faith in the land, in rain that hadn't fallen for months, in the potential of abandoned fields. It was a kind of strength she'd never encountered before, and despite her natural pragmatism, she found it deeply compelling. Dawn came early at Esperanza Ranch. Theodora woke to the sounds of activity outside her window, horses nickering, men calling to each other, the clank of metal tools. Dressing quickly in one of her 2 serviceable day dresses, she made her way to the kitchen where Mrs. Ramirez was already preparing breakfast. Good morning. You sleep well. the housekeeper asked cheerfully, placing a cup of coffee in front of Theodora before she could even answer. "Very well, thank you," Theodora replied, gratefully accepting the coffee. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Mrs. Ramirez waved off the offer. No, you are guest, but tomorrow maybe you help with bread, yes. I teach you Arizona style." Theodora smiled, appreciating that the woman understood her need to be useful. "I'd like that very much." Vincent entered a moment later, his shirt damp with sweat despite the early hour. "Good morning, Miss Kincaid. I hope we didn't wake you." "Not at all," she assured him. "I'm an early riser by habit." He nodded approvingly. "A useful trait out here. Most of our work is done before the worst heat of the day." Over breakfast, Vincent explained the operation of the ranch. Besides Mrs. Ramirez and her husband Roberto, who served as foreman, there were 3 permanent ranch hands and occasionally seasonal workers when needed. They raised and trained horses, primarily for the Army and for stagecoach companies, with a sideline in specialty breeding for wealthy ranchers looking to improve their stock. "Would you like a tour after breakfast?" Vincent offered. "You should know your way around if you're staying for a while." Theodora accepted eagerly and soon found herself following Vincent through the various buildings and corrals that made up the heart of Esperanza Ranch. The stables were immaculate, the workshop organized, and everywhere she looked, she saw evidence of careful planning and resourcefulness. "This catchment system is ingenious," she remarked, examining the arrangement of gutters and pipes that directed rainwater from every roof into large wooden cisterns. "Necessity breeds innovation," Vincent replied with a shrug. "Out here, you either adapt or you fail." As they approached the garden, Theodora was even more impressed. Protected by stone walls that provided shade and reduced evaporation, the garden contained neat rows of vegetables, tomatoes, peppers, onions, beans, and others she didn't recognize. "Mrs. Ramirez's domain," Vincent explained. "She grew up in Sonora and knows more about desert gardening than anyone I've ever met. Those plants," he pointed to a row of spiny-looking vegetation, "are native to this region. The Indians have been eating them for centuries." "And the orchard," Theodora gestured to the trees beyond. "Peaches, apricots, and figs, all varieties that can handle heat and limited water. They're still young, but they produced their first small crop last year." Pride was evident in his voice. "Each year we expand a little more, try new things. It's remarkable," Theodora said sincerely. "You've created an oasis." Vincent's expression softened. "That's the nicest compliment anyone's paid this place. Thank you." They continued walking, coming to a corral where several magnificent horses were being exercised by one of the ranch hands. "These are your Army horses?" Theodora asked, admiring their strength and condition. "Some of them. The others are out grazing." Vincent leaned against the fence. "The black stallion there, that's Thunder. He's our prize breeding stud. Those 2 sorrels are being trained for the stage line, and the bay mare is going to the fort next month." Theodora watched the animals move, impressed by their quality. "My father kept carriage horses in Boston, but I never saw the business side of it." "Did you ride much?" Vincent asked. "Some, though not as well as I'd like," she admitted. "My mother thought it unladylike to be too accomplished on horseback." Vincent chuckled. "Well, out here, riding well isn't just an accomplishment, it's a necessity. If you're interested, I'd be happy to help you improve your skills." "I'd like that," Theodora replied, surprising herself with her eagerness. She'd always loved riding but had few opportunities in recent years as her family's fortunes declined. The tour concluded at a small rise behind the main house, where a single cottonwood tree provided shade. From this vantage point, the entire ranch spread out before them, a testament to what vision and hard work could accomplish. "This is my thinking spot," Vincent said, a touch of self-consciousness in his voice. "When problems seem too big or decisions too difficult, I come here to remind myself how far we've come already." Theodora could see why. The view offered perspective both literally and figuratively. "It's a special place," she agreed. "Thank you for sharing it with me." They stood in companionable silence for a moment before Vincent spoke again. I have to check on some fencing on the north side today, but Roberto can show you anything else you're curious about, and tomorrow, if you still want to, we'll go into town. I'd appreciate that, Theodora said. And perhaps this afternoon I could help Mrs. Ramirez. I don't want to be idle while I'm here. Vincent nodded approvingly. She'd welcome the help, I'm sure, just don't let her work you too hard on your first day. With that, he left her to find her way back to the house, and Theodora took a moment longer to appreciate the view. Against all odds, Vincent Xavier had carved out this productive ranch from seemingly inhospitable land. If he could do that, perhaps she too could forge a new life in this strange, beautiful territory. The next few days established a rhythm. Theodora helped Mrs. Ramirez with household tasks in the mornings, learning to make tortillas, and discovering that she had a talent for preserving the garden's bounty. In the afternoons, Vincent made time to give her riding lessons, teaching her the Western style of horsemanship that was so different from what she'd learned in Boston. On Saturday morning, Theodora rose before dawn, excitement fluttering in her stomach at the prospect of visiting Copper Springs. She chose her best day dress, a practical navy blue cotton with minimal trim, and pinned her hair in a neat style that would fit under her bonnet. Vincent was waiting by the wagon when she emerged, and something in his expression as he looked at her made her heart beat a little faster. "You look very nice," he said simply. "Thank you," she replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. "I want to make a good impression if I'm to inquire about employment." He helped her onto the wagon seat with a strong, steady hand, then climbed up beside her and set the team in motion. The morning was still cool, the sky turning from lavender to gold as the sun crept over the eastern mountains. Copper Springs started as a mining camp, Vincent explained as they traveled. Silver mostly, some copper, the mines are still operating, but the town has grown beyond that now. There's a general store, a hotel with a decent restaurant, a smithy, a small bank, and even a schoolhouse, though they've had trouble keeping a teacher. Theodora's interest piqued at this last detail. Really? Why is that? Last teacher was a young woman from Philadelphia. She lasted 6 months before deciding frontier life wasn't for her, Vincent said with a shrug. The one before that got married to a rancher and moved to his property. They've had the school closed since April. Do you think they might consider me for the position? Theodora asked, trying to keep the eagerness from her voice. Vincent glanced at her with a smile. With your education, I think they'd hire you on the spot if you're interested. The possibility sent a thrill through Theodora. Teaching wasn't something she'd considered before, but the idea appealed to her immediately. As they crested a hill, Copper Springs came into view, a collection of buildings nestled in a small valley, with mountains rising dramatically behind it. It was larger than Theodora had expected, with perhaps 50 structures arranged along a main street and several side roads. It's grown considerably in the last few years, Vincent commented, noting her surprise. The railroad spur that went in last year helped tremendously. They entered the town proper, and Theodora watched with interest as people went about their morning business. Women in practical frontier dress shopped or chatted on boardwalks. Miners and cowboys patronized the saloon even at this early hour, and children played in the dusty street. Vincent guided the wagon to a hitching post in front of the general store. "We'll start here. Randall knows everyone and everything that happens in town. If the school board is still looking for a teacher, he'll know who to talk to." Inside, the store was a treasure trove of goods, everything from flour and sugar to tools, fabric, ready-made clothing, and even a small selection of books. A balding man with spectacles and a friendly smile looked up from behind the counter. "Vincent Xavier? About time you showed your face in town." His eyes moved to Theodora with open curiosity. "Randall, this is Miss Theodora Kincaid. She's James Kincaid's sister, newly arrived from Boston. Miss Kincaid, this is Randall Miller, proprietor of our finest and only general store." "Pleased to meet you, Miss Kincaid," Randall said, his gaze assessing but not unfriendly. James mentioned a sister might be joining him. Fine young man, your brother. Did good work for Ben Holloway before signing on for the cattle drive. Thank you, Theodora replied. I'm glad to hear he made a positive impression. Miss Kincaid is staying at Esperanza until James returns, Vincent explained. But she's interested in finding employment in town. I thought the school might be looking for a teacher still. Randall's eyes lit up. Indeed we are. Our school board chairman, Clarence Fulton, has been at his wits' end trying to find someone suitable. He looked Theodora up and down. You have teaching experience, Miss Kincaid. Not formal teaching, she admitted, though I tutored younger students when I was in school and I helped in my father's accounting business for several years. I received a thorough education at the Brighton Ladies' Academy in Massachusetts. Randall nodded thoughtfully. That's more education than most folks around here have. Fulton's over at the hotel having breakfast. Why don't you go speak with him while I help Vincent with his supplies? Theodora glanced at Vincent, who nodded encouragingly. Go ahead. I'll be a while here anyway. The hotel's just down the street, can't miss it. With a mixture of nervousness and determination, Theodora made her way to the Copper Springs Hotel. The dining room was easy to find, and the waitress pointed out Clarence Fulton, a distinguished-looking man with silver hair and a well-trimmed beard, reading a newspaper while he ate. Gathering her courage, Theodora approached his table. Mr. Fulton, excuse me for interrupting your breakfast. My name is Theodora Kincaid. Mr. Miller at the general store suggested I speak with you about the teaching position. Fulton looked up, surprise quickly giving way to interest. He set aside his newspaper and gestured to the chair across from him. Please, Miss Kincaid, join me. Randall has excellent instincts about people. If he sent you, you're worth talking to. Over the next hour, Theodora found herself in what amounted to an impromptu interview. Fulton asked about her education, her knowledge of various subjects, and her views on teaching methods. He explained that the school had about 20 students ranging in age from 6 to 16, with varied levels of previous education. Some of our students are quite advanced in arithmetic and reading, while others have had almost no formal schooling, he explained. It's a challenging position, requiring adaptability and patience. I understand, Theodora said. I believe every child deserves the opportunity to learn, regardless of their starting point. Fulton seemed pleased with her responses. The position pays $30 a month, with lodging provided in the small house behind the schoolhouse. It's modest but clean. We expect classes to run Monday through Friday, with preparation for Sunday services also part of the teacher's duties, as we currently have no permanent minister. The terms were better than Theodora had dared hope for. With free lodging and that salary, she could support herself comfortably and even save some money. When would you need me to start? She asked. As soon as possible, Fulton replied. The children have been without structured education since April. We'd like to begin the new term in 2 weeks, if that would give you enough time to prepare. Theodora's mind raced. 2 weeks would allow her to get properly settled and organize lesson plans. Yes, that should be sufficient. Fulton extended his hand. Then, pending approval from the other board members, which I anticipate will be a formality, I'd like to offer you the position, Miss Kincaid. Theodora shook his hand, feeling a surge of accomplishment. Thank you, Mr. Fulton. I'll do my best to justify your confidence in me. By the time she returned to the general store, Vincent had completed most of his shopping. His face brightened when he saw her expression. Good news, very good, she confirmed. Mr. Fulton has offered me the teaching position starting in 2 weeks. Vincent's smile was genuine. Congratulations, I knew you'd impress him. As they loaded the supplies into the wagon, Theodora felt a strange mixture of excitement and something like regret. She was thrilled to have secured a position so quickly, yet the thought of leaving Esperanza Ranch and Vincent created an unexpected hollow feeling in her chest. Mr. Fulton said there's a house for the teacher behind the schoolhouse, she explained as they started the journey back to the ranch. so I won't need to impose on your hospitality much longer." Was it her imagination, or did Vincent's expression falter slightly? "You're welcome to stay at Esperanza until you're completely ready," he said after a moment. "No need to rush into the teacher's house until you've had a chance to see it and make sure it's suitable." "Thank you," Theodora replied, touched by his continued generosity. "I'd like to see it first, and perhaps prepare some lessons before I move." They rode in silence for a while, the rhythmic creak of the wagon strangely comforting. Finally, Vincent spoke again. "I was planning to check on the Wilcox field again tomorrow. Would you like to come along? It might be your last chance to see more of the territory before your teaching duties begin." "I'd like that very much," Theodora said, perhaps too quickly. The thought of spending more time with Vincent was undeniably appealing. "Good," he replied, a smile returning to his face. "We'll make a day of it. Pack a lunch, see how the seeds are doing." As they crested the final hill before Esperanza Ranch came into view, dark clouds were building on the western horizon, an unusual sight after so many clear days. Vincent noticed them too, his expression shifting to one of intense hope. "Could be we'll get some rain tonight," he said, trying to sound casual but unable to hide his excitement. "Would that be enough to help your seeds?" Theodora asked. "Any rain helps," he replied. Even a light shower would be better than nothing. By the time they reached the ranch, the clouds had spread across half the sky, and a cool breeze had picked up, carrying the unmistakable scent of approaching rain. The ranch hands were hurrying to complete outdoor tasks and secure equipment, their movements energized by the prospect of precipitation. Mrs. Ramirez stood on the porch, looking skyward with her hands clasped as if in prayer. "First good chance of rain in months," Vincent explained as he helped Theodora down from the wagon. "Everyone's a bit excited." "Including you," she observed with a smile. He grinned unabashedly. "Especially me." Throughout dinner, Vincent could barely keep still, repeatedly going to the window to check the progress of the storm. Shortly after they finished eating, the first fat drops began to hit the roof, quickly building to a steady downpour. Without a word, Vincent grabbed his hat and coat and headed for the door. Theodora followed him onto the porch, watching as he stepped out into the rain, face turned upward, arms spread wide in a gesture of pure joy. The sight moved her deeply, this strong, capable man so overcome with gratitude for something most Bostonians would consider an inconvenience. When he turned to look at her, rain streaming down his face, his smile was radiant. "Come out," he called over the sound of the downpour. "Feel it." Propriety suggested she should decline, but something more powerful, a desire to share in this moment of pure joy, propelled her forward. Stepping into the rain, Theodora gasped as the cool water soaked through her dress almost immediately. Vincent laughed, the sound merging with the drumming of the rain. "Isn't it glorious?" And strangely it was. Standing there getting drenched, watching the parched earth drink in the precious moisture, Theodora felt more alive than she had in years. She found herself laughing too, spinning in a circle with her face to the sky, tasting the rain on her lips. When she stopped spinning, Vincent was watching her with an expression that made her breath catch a mixture of delight and something deeper, more intense. "You understand," he said quietly, barely audible over the rain. "Understand what?" she asked, equally softly. "The miracle of it. Not everyone does." Before she could respond, a massive crack of thunder shook the air, followed by a brilliant flash of lightning that illuminated the landscape for an instant. "Perhaps we should go inside now," Theodora suggested, suddenly aware of how improper they must look soaking wet, standing in the open during a thunderstorm. Vincent nodded reluctantly. "You're right. It's not safe out here with the lightning." They hurried back to the porch where Mrs. Ramirez met them with towels, clucking disapprovingly at their drenched state but unable to hide her own joy at the rain. "You'll catch death of cold," she scolded, but her eyes were twinkling. "Go change, both of you. I'll make hot chocolate." As Theodora turned toward her room, Vincent caught her hand gently. "Thank you," he said simply. For what? For sharing that moment, for understanding why it matters. His hand was warm despite the cool rain, and Theodora found herself reluctant to pull away. "Thank you for showing me," she replied softly. Something passed between them in that moment, an unspoken connection, a recognition of shared values that transcended their brief acquaintance. Then, remembering herself, Theodora withdrew her hand and hurried to her room to change, her heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with the brief run through the rain. The storm continued through the night, the steady rainfall occasionally punctuated by thunder. Theodora lay awake for hours, listening to the soothing sound and thinking about Vincent Xavier, his unwavering faith, his joy in the rain, and the way his eyes had looked when he thanked her for understanding. By morning, the rain had stopped, but the transformation of the landscape was remarkable. The world seemed washed clean, colors more vibrant, and the air held a freshness Theodora hadn't experienced since arriving in Arizona. Even the light seemed different, softer somehow. When she joined Vincent for breakfast, his mood was jubilant. 6 hours of steady rain, he announced. The cisterns are full, the ground is soaked, and it couldn't have come at a better time for the newly planted seeds. Will we still ride out to the Wilcox field today? Theodora asked, hoping the rain hadn't changed his plans. Absolutely, Vincent confirmed. I'm even more eager to see it now. The ground will be too muddy for the wagon, but we can ride. Are you up for that? Of course, she replied, hiding her nervousness. Her riding lessons had been going well, but a long ride over potentially difficult terrain would be a new challenge. After breakfast, Vincent saddled 2 horses, his own gray gelding and a gentle bay mare for Theodora. "This is Daisy," he explained as he adjusted the stirrups to fit Theodora's height. "She's steady and sensible, perfect for this kind of ride." The journey to the Wilcox field took nearly 2 hours, during which Theodora's appreciation for the Arizona landscape deepened considerably. With the recent rain, wildflowers she hadn't noticed before had unfurled colorful blooms, and the usually dusty earth released a rich, earthy scent that reminded her of renewal and possibility. Vincent pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the area's history, including tales of the Apache who had originally inhabited the region. His knowledge was extensive, and Theodora found herself captivated by his obvious love for this challenging land. "There it is," Vincent said eventually, pointing to a stretch of land ahead. "The Wilcox place." As they drew closer, Theodora could see the remains of a modest cabin and barn, both showing signs of neglect but still structurally sound. Beyond these buildings lay the field where she had first observed Vincent planting seeds now transformed by the rain into a sea of rich, dark soil. They dismounted near the cabin, and Vincent led her to the field. Kneeling, he gently brushed away some soil to reveal tiny green shoots already emerging from several of the seeds. "Look at that," he said, voice filled with wonder. "Already sprouting. Thomas always said this soil was special." Theodora knelt beside him, marveling at the tiny plants. "It's remarkable how quickly they've responded to the rain." "Life is persistent," Vincent replied, carefully covering the shoots again. "It waits for the right conditions, sometimes for a very long time, but it's always ready to surge forward when the moment comes." Something in his words resonated deeply with Theodora. She too had been waiting, perhaps, for the right conditions to truly live rather than merely survive. They spread a blanket under a large mesquite tree and shared the lunch misses. Ramirez had packed fresh bread, cheese, dried fruit, and canteens of cool water. The simple meal tasted better than any fancy dinner Theodora could remember from her Boston days. "What made you decide to come west?" Vincent asked as they ate. "It's a difficult journey for anyone, but especially for a woman traveling alone." Theodora considered her answer carefully. "Necessity initially. After our parents died, the family business failed. There were debts." She trailed off, still uncomfortable discussing the financial disgrace that had followed her father's death. James had written about opportunities here, about building something new. It seemed better than the alternatives in Boston. Which were, Vincent prompted gently. Becoming a companion to some wealthy widow or perhaps a governess, Theodora admitted. Not terrible fates, but not what I wanted for my life. She looked out over the field, where unseen seeds were awakening beneath the soil. I wanted something more, something that was mine, that I built myself. Vincent nodded. I understand that feeling well. What about you? Theodora asked. You mentioned coming west after the war, but was there more to it than that? A shadow crossed Vincent's face, and for a moment Theodora thought he might not answer. Then he sighed, leaning back against the tree trunk. I had nothing to go back to in Massachusetts, he said quietly. My parents died while I was away fighting. Our farm was sold to pay taxes, and I wasn't the same person who had left. The things I saw during the war, the things I did. He shook his head. I couldn't imagine fitting back into that life. I needed to start fresh, somewhere I could build something with my own hands on my own terms. The pain in his voice was palpable, and without thinking, Theodora reached out to touch his hand. I'm sorry. Vincent turned his hand to clasp hers briefly. Don't be. It led me here, and despite the challenges, I wouldn't change that. He looked around at the field, the distant mountains. This land has healed me in ways I never expected. They sat in companionable silence for a while, finishing their lunch as clouds drifted across the sky, occasionally dimming the sun's intensity. May I ask you something? Theodora said finally. Of course. Why do you continue to plant this field? You said the bank will claim it eventually. The work you're doing, it won't benefit you. Vincent considered her question. It's not about benefit, not in the usual sense anyway. He paused, gathering his thoughts. When Thomas was dying, I promised him I wouldn't let his dream die too. He believed in this land when no one else did. Continuing his work honors that belief. But if the bank sells the property, then whoever buys it will find fields ready for harvest instead of neglected ground, Vincent said simply. And maybe they'll appreciate what Thomas saw here. Maybe they'll continue what he started. The selflessness of this perspective struck Theodora deeply. In Boston, every action was calculated for advantage, every relationship evaluated for potential benefit. Vincent's approach was entirely different, giving without expectation of return, planting seeds he might never see harvested. You're an unusual man, Vincent Xavier, she said softly. He smiled, a touch of self-consciousness in his expression. Just trying to live according to my beliefs, not always successfully, but I try. As the afternoon waned, they packed up their lunch things and prepared to return to the ranch. Before mounting, Theodora took one last look at the field, imagining how it might look in a month's time, green with new growth. Thank you for bringing me here, she said. I understand better now. Understand what? Vincent asked, echoing her question from the previous night. Why faith matters, she replied. Especially here. The ride back to Esperanza was quieter, both of them absorbed in their thoughts. The landscape seemed different to Theodora now, filled with potential rather than merely harsh and unforgiving. She was beginning to see it through Vincent's eyes as a place of hidden possibilities, of life waiting to emerge. The next week passed quickly, as Theodora prepared to assume her teaching duties. She visited the schoolhouse with Clarence Fulton, inspected the teacher's residence, a small but tidy two-room structure, and began developing lesson plans based on the books available and Fulton's description of the students' varied abilities. Throughout this time, Vincent found reasons to accompany her to town, offering advice about local customs and introducing her to various community members who might be helpful in her new role. His support was invaluable, and Theodora found herself increasingly dreading the day she would move from Esperanza Ranch into the teacher's residence. It wasn't just Vincent's presence she would miss, though that was a significant factor. In the short time she'd been there, the ranch had begun to feel like home in a way no place had since her parents' house in better days. Mrs. Ramirez's warmth, the rhythm of ranch life, the beauty of the surroundings all had worked their way into her heart, On her final evening at the ranch, Mrs. Ramirez prepared a special dinner, and even Roberto and the ranch hands joined them, offering good wishes for her new position. The atmosphere was festive yet tinged with a bittersweet quality that suggested Theodora wasn't the only one feeling the impending loss. After dinner, Vincent invited her for a last walk to his thinking spot beneath the cottonwood tree. The evening was perfect warm but not uncomfortably so, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of rain, washed earth and distant mountains outlined against a sky painted in spectacular sunset hues. "It's hard to believe I've only been here 3 weeks," Theodora said as they reached the tree. "It feels much longer." "In a good way, I hope," Vincent replied, a question in his voice. "The best way," she assured him. "I've never felt so, at home somewhere so quickly." Vincent's expression softened. "I felt that way too when I first came here, as if the land itself welcomed me." They stood in silence for a moment, watching as the last light faded from the western sky and the first stars appeared overhead. "Theodora," Vincent began, then hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. "I hope you know that you're always welcome here, not just as a visitor or guest, but—" He paused again, seeming to search for the right words. Theodora's heart beat faster. But as someone who belongs," he finished, turning to face her fully. "I know we haven't known each other long, but I feel, that is, I've come to." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I'm not saying this well." "You're doing fine," Theodora encouraged softly, hope rising within her. Vincent took a deep breath. "What I'm trying to say is that these weeks with you have been the happiest I've known in years. You understand things about this place, about what matters to me that no one else has. And the thought of you leaving, even just to town, even though I'll still see you. It's harder than I expected." The vulnerability in his admission touched Theodora deeply. "It's hard for me too," she confessed. "I've been trying to tell myself it's silly to feel this way after such a short time, but it's not silly," Vincent interrupted, taking a step closer. "Some things don't need years to grow, sometimes you just know." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, and took her hand in his. The simple contact sent warmth spreading through Theodora's entire body. "I'm not asking you to change your plans," he continued. "The teaching position is perfect for you, and you'll be wonderful at it. I just wanted you to know how I feel, and that Esperanza will always be here for you. I will always be here for you." Theodora found herself at a loss for words, overwhelmed by emotions she hadn't allowed herself to fully acknowledge until this moment. Instead of speaking, she closed the distance between them, raising her free hand to his cheek in a gesture of tenderness that expressed what words could not. Vincent's eyes searched hers, and whatever he saw there gave him courage. Slowly, respectfully, he lowered his head until their lips met in a kiss so gentle it was almost reverent. Theodora responded with equal gentleness, her heart soaring with newfound joy. When they finally parted, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I was afraid that might be too forward," he murmured. "It wasn't," Theodora assured him, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was perfect." They stood together beneath the cottonwood tree as full darkness settled around them, speaking softly of feelings that had grown so unexpectedly, yet seemed as natural as the rain falling on parched earth. No formal declarations were made, no promises beyond an agreement that whatever was growing between them deserved the chance to flourish. When they finally walked back to the house, hand in hand under the canopy of stars, Theodora felt a sense of rightness, of coming home in the deepest sense of the word. The following morning, Vincent drove Theodora to town with her belongings. The teacher's residence, while clean and functional, seemed stark and unwelcoming compared to Esperanza Ranch, but Theodora was determined to make it her own. "I'll help you get settled," Vincent offered, carrying her trunk inside. They spent the day arranging her few possessions, hanging curtains Mrs. Ramirez had sewn as a parting gift, and setting up the small classroom according to Theodora's plans. By late afternoon, both spaces looked considerably more inviting. "Will you stay for dinner?" Theodora asked as they finished. It won't be as good as Mrs. Ramirez's cooking, but I make a decent stew, Vincent smiled. I'd like that. Over a simple meal at her small table, they discussed practical matters: how often Vincent came to town, when Theodora might be able to visit the ranch, and the approaching start of the school term. The mercantile gets mail 3 times a week, Vincent explained. I could bring anything addressed to you out to the ranch when I visit, if you'd like to write to your brother. That would be helpful, thank you, Theodora replied. I should let him know I've found employment and a place to stay. And that his sister has made quite an impression on Copper Springs already, Vincent added with a smile. Randall tells me people are talking about the new teacher with considerable enthusiasm. I hope I can live up to their expectations, Theodora said, a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. Vincent reached across the table to take her hand. You'll exceed them, I have no doubt. When it came time for him to leave, they stood in the doorway, reluctant to part. I'll be in town on Saturday, Vincent promised, and you're welcome at Esperanza anytime, Mrs. Ramirez already asked when you'll visit. Soon, Theodora assured him. Once I've gotten the school term properly started, Vincent nodded, understanding her need to focus on her new responsibilities. He cupped her cheek gently, his eyes full of affection. Until Saturday, then. Their goodbye kiss was brief but tender, a promise of more to come. And as Theodora watched him ride away, she felt not desolation but anticipation, the sweet certainty that this parting was temporary, a necessary interlude in a story that was just beginning. The first day of school arrived, bringing with it 20 curious children and several parents eager to meet the new teacher. Theodora greeted them with calm confidence, having spent days preparing for this moment. The students ranged from shy 6-year-old twins to a gangly 16-year-old boy who clearly wondered if he was too old for schooling. Their abilities varied widely, as Fulton had warned, but all seemed willing to give their new teacher a chance. By the end of that first week, Theodora had fallen in love with teaching. Despite the challenges of managing multiple age groups and ability levels simultaneously, she found deep satisfaction in igniting curiosity and witnessing the moment when a difficult concept suddenly made sense to a struggling student. True to his word, Vincent appeared at her door on Saturday morning, his wagon loaded with supplies for the ranch and a small package in his hands. A housewarming gift, he explained, presenting her with the parcel wrapped in brown paper. Inside, Theodora found a small watercolor painting of Esperanza Ranch as seen from the thinking spot, beautifully rendered with the Catalina Mountains rising in the background. Vincent, it's lovely, she breathed, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. Did you paint this? He nodded, a touch of color rising in his cheeks. It's a hobby I rarely have time for. I thought you might like a reminder of the view. I'll treasure it, she said sincerely, already planning where to hang it in her small home. They spent the day together, Vincent helping with small repairs around the teacher's house, while Theodora prepared lesson plans for the coming week. In the evening, they walked to the hotel restaurant for dinner, where several townspeople greeted Theodora warmly, clearly having accepted her as part of the community already. As the weeks passed, a pattern emerged. Theodora threw herself into teaching during the week, while Vincent continued his work at the ranch, including regular visits to the Wilcox field where the crops were flourishing after the timely rainfall. On Saturdays, they would spend the day together, sometimes in town, occasionally riding to the ranch for dinner with Mrs. Ramirez and Roberto. Their relationship deepened naturally, built on shared values, mutual respect, and a growing love that neither felt the need to rush or define too precisely. Vincent's occasional kisses grew more confident, and Theodora found herself thinking of him at odd moments throughout her days, a smile often appearing unbidden at some remembered conversation or shared joke. In October, nearly 2 months after Theodora had started teaching, her brother James finally returned from the cattle drive. His arrival in Copper Springs caused a minor sensation, as he came not alone but with a young widow named Clara and her 2-year-old son whom he had met in Wyoming and fallen in love with along the journey home. Their reunion was joyous, with James expressing delight at finding his sister not only well established but clearly happy in her new life. He was equally pleased to meet Vincent, whose reputation as one of the territory's most respected ranchers preceded him. "Xavier's been looking after my sister, has he?" James asked during a dinner at the hotel, his tone light but his gaze assessing. "More accurately, we've been looking after each other," Theodora replied with a smile at Vincent. James nodded, apparently satisfied with what he saw between them. "Well, I appreciate it all the same. Knowing Thea has good people around her makes me feel better about my own news." That news, it transpired, was that James and Clara planned to marry as soon as possible and establish their home not on his original homestead, but on land nearer to Prescott, where Clara had family and better opportunities existed for raising cattle. "What about your homestead here?" Theodora asked, concerned about the property her brother had struggled to establish. James shrugged. "It was never more than a rough start. I'll officially abandon the claim so someone else can file on it if they want." He looked at Vincent. "Unless you're interested." "It borders your north pasture, doesn't it?" Vincent considered this. "It does, and it has good water access. I might be interested in filing a claim depending on the price." The men agreed to discuss the matter further the following day, and as the evening concluded, James pulled Theodora aside for a private word. "I like your Mr. Xavier," he said without preamble. "He looks at you the way I look at Clara." Theodora felt her cheeks warm. "He's a good man, James." "The best I've known." "I can see that, and I can see you're happy here." James squeezed her hand. "That's all I ever wanted for you, Thea, a chance at real happiness, not just security or duty." His blessing, though unnecessary, touched Theodora deeply. "Thank you. I am happy, more than I ever expected to be." The following week brought another significant development. Vincent arrived in town on an unscheduled Tuesday, seeking out Theodora after school had dismissed for the day. "What brings you to town midweek?" she asked, pleased but surprised by his appearance. "News," he replied, his expression more serious than usual. "The bank is foreclosing on the Wilcox property next month. They've already scheduled an auction." Theodora's heart sank. "So soon? What about the crops you planted?" "They'll be ready to harvest just before the auction, thankfully." Vincent ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she now recognized as indicating he was wrestling with a decision. "Theodora, I'm thinking of buying the property." "You are." She hadn't expected this, though in retrospect, it made perfect sense. "Can you? Is it financially feasible?" Vincent nodded. "Between what I've saved and what the bank is willing to lend me based on Esperanza's success, yes. And with James willing to sell me his claim at a reasonable price, I could expand Esperanza significantly." "That would be wonderful," Theodora said sincerely. "You've put so much work into that field already, and you understand its potential in a way no other buyer might." "There's something else," Vincent continued, his gaze intense. "If I do this acquire both properties, Esperanza would nearly double in size. It would mean more work, more responsibility, more hands to hire." "You're certainly capable of managing it," Theodora assured him. "Yes, but—" Vincent took both her hands in his. "It would also mean building for the future in a more permanent way, and I find myself not wanting to plan that future without knowing where you might fit in it." Theodora's breath caught. "What are you saying, Vincent?" "I'm saying rather poorly that I love you, Theodora Kincaid. I think I've loved you since I saw you watching me plant seeds in that dry ground, understanding the why of it when most people only saw the foolishness." He squeezed her hands gently. "I'm not asking you to give up teaching or change your plans. I'm just asking if there might be a place for me in those plans, as there is most definitely a place for you in mine." Joy surged through Theodora, bright and overwhelming. "Vincent Xavier, there has been a place for you in my heart since that first day, though I scarcely understood it then. I love you to your faith, your determination, your kindness, everything that makes you who you are." The relief and happiness that transformed Vincent's face was beautiful to behold. He pulled her into an embrace that was both tender and passionate, their kiss conveying what words alone could not express. When they finally parted, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I should ask properly," he murmured. "Will you marry me, Theodora? Will you build a life with me at Esperanza?" "Yes," she replied without hesitation. "Yes to both." The news of their engagement spread quickly through Copper Springs, met with universal approval, and more than a few comments about how everyone had seen it coming from the start. Clarence Fulton assured Theodora that her teaching position would remain open for the remainder of the school year, giving them time to make arrangements and plan their future. The auction for the Wilcox property took place in early November. Vincent attended with Theodora by his side, her presence giving him strength as the bidding climbed higher than he had anticipated. Several wealthy cattle ranchers from nearby counties had developed a sudden interest in the land, perhaps recognizing its value from the flourishing crops Vincent had cultivated. Just when it seemed the price might exceed Vincent's limit, one of the main competitors, a silver-haired rancher named Peterson, approached them during a brief recess in the bidding. "Xavier," he said gruffly, "those crops on the Wilcox place, you planted them?" Vincent nodded. "Yes, sir." "Thought so. Recognized your methods from what you've done at Esperanza." Peterson studied him thoughtfully. "You want this land pretty badly, I take it?" "I do," Vincent admitted. "Thomas Wilcox was a friend and I made him a promise." Peterson nodded slowly. "I heard about that." "Heard you've been tending that field for months without any guarantee you'd ever see a return." He glanced at Theodora, then back to Vincent. "Tell you what, I'll bow out of the bidding. Land should go to someone who already cares for it the way you do." Before Vincent could respond, Peterson walked away, and when the auction resumed, he conspicuously made no further bids. With his main competition removed, Vincent successfully purchased the Wilcox property for a sum that, while substantial, was within his means. As they left the auction, Vincent was quiet, processing what had happened. "I never expected Peterson to do that," he finally said. "We've barely spoken 3 words to each other before today. Perhaps your reputation speaks for you," Theodora suggested. "The way you honored your promise to Thomas Wilcox that matters to people here." Vincent squeezed her hand, visibly moved. "It seems that way." The harvest from the Wilcox field proved even more bountiful than Vincent had hoped. The corn, beans, and squash yielded well above average, providing food for the ranch and surplus to sell or trade in town. The success vindicated Thomas Wilcox's belief in the land and Vincent's faith in continuing his friend's work. With the additional property secured and James's claim in the process of being transferred, Vincent turned his attention to expanding the ranch house. If Theodora was to join him there after their wedding in the spring, he wanted to ensure Esperanza was a home worthy of her. The winter of 1876-1877 proved milder than usual, allowing construction to proceed steadily. Vincent added 2 bedrooms, enlarged the kitchen to Mrs. Ramirez's delight, and built a proper office where Theodora could continue to prepare lessons even after they were married, as she planned to return to teaching once the school found a permanent replacement. Theodora divided her time between her teaching duties and helping plan the renovations, discovering a talent for design that complemented Vincent's practical building skills. Together, they created spaces that reflected both their personalities, practical yet beautiful, sturdy yet welcoming. On weekends, they often rode out to what everyone now called the Wilcox Field, planning how to incorporate it fully into Esperanza's operations. Vincent decided to honor Thomas's vision by continuing to grow drought-resistant food crops there rather than converting it to pasture. "It's what he would have wanted," Vincent explained as they walked the perimeter one crisp January day. "And it makes sense. Diversifying what the ranch produces makes us more resilient when drought or other challenges come." "Speaking of challenges," Theodora said, taking his hand, Have you thought about what we'll do if the school can't find a replacement teacher quickly? I don't want to leave the children without education, but I also don't want to delay our wedding. Vincent considered this. What if we didn't have to choose? The ranch house will be large enough. What if you continued teaching until a replacement is found, even after we're married? I could drive you to town each morning and pick you up after school. The suggestion was practical and generous, typical of Vincent's approach to problems. You wouldn't mind, it could be months. I wouldn't mind at all, he assured her. I want you to be happy, Theodora. If teaching contributes to that happiness, then it's important to me too. Theodora kissed him, marveling at how perfectly their lives seemed to fit together, how each supported the other's goals and dreams rather than competing with them. As winter gave way to early spring, the land around Esperanza Ranch transformed once again. Wildflowers carpeted the normally barren ground, cacti burst into improbable blooms, and the fields Vincent had planted with various crops showed promising green shoots. The wedding was set for the first weekend in April, exactly 1 year from when Thomas and Sarah Wilcox had died, a date chosen deliberately to transform a time of sad memories into one of new beginnings. 2 weeks before the wedding, Clarence Fulton arrived at the schoolhouse with exciting news. "We've found a teacher," he announced. "A young man from Denver with excellent credentials and frontier experience. He can start in May." "That's wonderful," Theodora exclaimed. "The children will be in good hands and I can focus on Esperanza without worry." The timing seemed perfect. The new teacher would arrive just as Theodora and Vincent returned from their brief honeymoon trip to Prescott, where they would visit James, Clara, and their growing family. As the wedding day approached, Esperanza Ranch became the center of activity. Mrs. Ramirez orchestrated the preparations with military precision, directing ranch hands in constructing tables and benches for the feast, overseeing the preparation of traditional Mexican dishes alongside American favorites, and ensuring the newly expanded ranch house gleamed with cleanliness. Theodora's students insisted on participating, creating decorations and practicing a song to perform at the celebration. The entire community embraced the occasion, with women from town bringing dishes to share and men offering practical assistance with the arrangements. The night before the wedding, Vincent and Theodora stood together on the porch of what would soon be their shared home, looking out at the star-filled sky. "I can hardly believe how much has happened in less than a year," Theodora mused. "When I arrived here, I was lost, unsure of my place in the world. And now," Vincent asked softly, "now I know exactly where I belong." She turned to face him, taking both his hands in hers. "With you, building something meaningful together, teaching children who need knowledge. Being part of this community that has welcomed me so warmly." Vincent's smile was tender as he brought her hands to his lips. "When I was planting those seeds in dry ground, I never imagined the harvest would be this abundant, not just crops, but love, partnership, a future brighter than I dared hope for." "Your faith was strong," Theodora reminded him, "even when there was no evidence that rain would come." "And now rain has come in many forms," he replied, pulling her gently into his arms. "You are the most unexpected and precious of those blessings, Theodora Kincaid." "Soon to be Theodora Xavier," she corrected with a smile. "I like the sound of that," Vincent murmured, before lowering his lips to hers in a kiss that held all the promise of their tomorrow. The wedding day dawned clear and mild, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of spring blossoms across Esperanza Ranch. Theodora prepared in what had been the guest room and would now be their bedroom, assisted by Clara, who had arrived the previous day with James and their children. Her wedding dress was simple but elegant ivory cotton with delicate embroidery that Mrs. Ramirez had added by hand as a wedding gift. Her hair was arranged with wildflowers rather than an elaborate veil, a choice that reflected her embrace of her new life in the territory. The ceremony took place beneath the cottonwood tree at Vincent's thinking spot, with the expanded ranch house and the distant mountains providing a backdrop that no church could rival. A circuit riding minister performed the service, his words nearly drowned out at times by the joyous birdsong that seemed to celebrate along with the assembled guests. Vincent, handsome in a new suit ordered specially from Tucson, watched Theodora approach with an expression of such love and wonder that several of the townswomen were seen dabbing at their eyes. James walked his sister to her groom, his own happiness evident in his proud smile. Their vows were simple yet profound promises to support each other through drought and plenty, to nurture their love as carefully as they nurtured the land, to face whatever challenges came with the same faith that had brought them together. As the minister pronounced them husband and wife, a chorus of cheers erupted from the guests. Vincent's kiss was tender yet passionate, a perfect balance that Theodora thought characterized their relationship as a whole. The celebration continued well into the evening, with food and music, dancing and laughter. Former students presented Theodora with a handmade quilt, each square containing a message or drawing from a child she had taught. Ranch hands had crafted a new sign for the entrance to the property. Esperanza Ranch Vincent and Theodora Xavier, EST, 1877. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in glorious hues of orange and purple, Vincent led Theodora away from the festivities to a quiet spot overlooking the Wilcox field, now lush with growing crops. "Happy?" he asked, his arm around her waist. "Completely," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "And you?" "More than I ever thought possible." Vincent turned to face her fully. "I have something for you, a wedding gift." From his pocket he withdrew a small velvet pouch. Inside was a delicate silver pendant in the shape of a seed, with tiny roots extending from one end and the beginnings of a sprout from the other. "It's beautiful," Theodora breathed as he fastened the chain around her neck. "The symbolism is perfect." "I had it made in Tucson," Vincent explained, "to remind us both how we began with seeds planted in dry ground, with faith that rain would come." Theodora touched the pendant gently. "Our love grew the same way, didn't it? An unlikely beginning that flourished despite challenging conditions." "Exactly," Vincent agreed, his eyes warm with affection. "And like the seeds, once given the right conditions, it grew quickly and strongly. And will continue to grow," Theodora added, her hand finding his, "for all the years to come." As they stood there in the fading light, overlooking the land they both loved, Theodora reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had come west seeking security and family, never imagining she would find a love so deep, a purpose so fulfilling, and a home so perfectly suited to her spirit. Vincent drew her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Shall we return to our guests, Mrs. Xavier?" "In a moment," Theodora replied, savoring the precious quiet of this first hour of their married life. "I just want to remember this, how it feels to stand here with you, looking out at everything we've built and everything we'll build together." Vincent nodded, understanding as he always did. Together they watched as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, witnesses to the beginning of a shared life rooted in faith, nourished by love, and promising a harvest more abundant than either could have imagined when their paths first crossed on that dry, dusty field. In the years that followed, Esperanza Ranch flourished beyond even Vincent's optimistic expectations. The innovative farming techniques he had developed, combined with Theodora's organizational skills and educational background, transformed their operation into one of the most successful and diverse in the territory. While Vincent continued to expand the horse breeding program, Theodora established a small school on the ranch for the children of their growing number of employees. 3 days a week, she also traveled to Copper Springs to assist the new teacher with advanced students preparing for college examinations. Their personal happiness was made complete 2 years after their marriage with the birth of their first child, a daughter they named Sarah Thomas Xavier in honor of their friends, whose legacy had brought them together. The little girl inherited her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined spirit, toddling after Vincent from an early age, eager to help with ranch chores. When Sarah was 3, a son joined the family. James Roberto Xavier followed 2 years later by another daughter, Elizabeth Maria. The Xavier children grew up surrounded by love, learning both academic subjects from their mother and practical ranch skills from their father. The Wilcox field became famous throughout the region for its bountiful harvests of drought-resistant crops. Farmers from as far away as New Mexico and Texas came to learn Vincent's methods, and Theodora compiled their techniques into a small handbook that was eventually published by the Territorial Agricultural Board. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Vincent surprised Theodora by taking her to the exact spot where she had first seen him planting seeds in seemingly hopeless ground. There, he had planted a circle of trees varieties carefully selected to thrive in the arid climate surrounding a small stone bench, inscribed with the words, "Faith stronger than any rainfall." "This is where our story began," he said as they sat together on the bench, their children playing nearby. "Where you found a foolish man planting seeds in dry ground." "Not foolish," Theodora corrected, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Visionary, and I thank God every day that I crested that ridge at just the right moment to witness your faith in action." Vincent's arm tightened around her. "Who would have thought that those seeds would yield not just crops, but everything that matters most in life?" As they watched their children laughing in the shade of the young trees that would grow strong and tall in the years to come, Theodora reflected that their love had followed the same pattern as those first seeds Vincent had planted, beginning with an act of faith, nurtured through challenges, and yielding a harvest more abundant and precious than either could have imagined. In the dry ground of the Arizona Territory, they had built not just a successful ranch but a true home, a place where faith and love flourished, where children grew strong and resilient, and where each day brought new appreciation for the unexpected blessings that could spring from the most unlikely beginnings.